Hello, how you doing? I'm back to talk wine and books again, which is something I've come to really enjoy doing, and I hope you'll forgive me. But this week I'm actually going to talk about my own book because it came out just 3-4 days ago, and it's this one here, Under a Riviera Moon. And this is my fifth fiction book. I've written 5 books in 5 years. But rather than tell you what is in here and what the story is about, I thought I would actually talk about something that someone messaged me and said, could I just go into a bit more detail about how I go about writing a book? So, 5 books in 5 years, that is quite a lot, but I want to tell you that the first fiction book I ever wrote, rather, it took me a long time to write it. It actually took me 4 years because I did it sort of in secret. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it, apart from my husband. And I think I just kept quiet about it because I wasn't really sure whether anyone would read my fiction, really. I'd written wine books, I'd written drinks books, but I'd put myself in that box. And so I had an idea for a fiction book which involved wine. That was the idea. Not massively. I just thought, if I write this fiction book, what I'll do is I'll make sure they always have, if they have got a glass of wine in front of them, if there's a scene where they're sharing a glass of wine, having a glass of wine, I'll make sure it's something really lovely so I can describe it. And then I hoped that you as the reader would read that wine description, and perhaps it would be a grape you'd never heard of, so it would make you think, right, I really want to go and try that. That was the idea, but it was very definitely not about writing a fiction book with lots of wine in it. It was really just weaving it in as you would do in normal life. So, as I said, the first book took 4 years to really get down on paper because I was doing it in my spare time, of which at the time I didn't really have very much. The children were smaller and blah, blah, blah. Cut to, I gave the manuscript to my editor at the time, my agent rather at the time. And the last meeting I had before lockdown was with a publisher who bought that book and commissioned 2 more, and I've actually been with them ever since. And then we've got another 3 and then another 2 books coming. So how I go about it is I get the idea, and I have this trusty notebook here. This is probably my 3rd one of these, and this goes with me everywhere, especially when I'm on the train, because I love being able to just write things down. And it might be that I've heard something on the radio, or I hear a song, or I read a story, or I sometimes see somebody. I don't know anything about them, but they look like an interesting character, and that will be put down in here just really to collect ideas. Then basically I start with a plot line. I'm not somebody who can just sit down and write and see where the story goes. I need to know where I'm going to start and where I'm going to end. And I also need to really know what's going to happen throughout, but obviously not in great detail. So when I start writing a chapter, I know it starts here and I know I've got to get to there, but how I get there sometimes might go off on its own tangent, because I'm quite a plan. I do love a plan. I love a plan. I love structure. I'm not going to say I love spreadsheets. I don't love spreadsheets, but I do like just having details mapped out. So once all those scribbles for plot lines have been written down in the book and an idea starts forming in my head, like I say, mostly when I'm just usually traveling in the car on a train, and I'll be thinking about it, obviously on my own, not when other people are in there, because that's impossible. But essentially all those notes get distilled down until, and I've done one with each of these books, and this might look terrifying, or you'll think I'm an absolute freak, but I end up with one piece of paper, and each post-it note is my cue for what that chapter is going to be about. So here we are. This is what the piece of paper looked like for Under a Riviera Moon. As you can see, the working title was Under a Harvest Moon, which is, I am terrible at titles. So all my titles of all the books I've done have actually been chosen by my editor, Sarah, who's done all of my books, with all my fiction books with me. She's absolutely amazing. And she always reads the manuscript, and then she just nails it with a title. So we always laugh. I have a terrible working title, and then, it's so simple. She just changed the word harvest to Riviera, and it instantly tells you where that book is set. Obviously, I didn't think of doing that. Anyway, So that's the book mapped out. So when I sit down to write on any day, say I'm doing a certain chapter, I will be able to then go, I'll just start writing, but I will go back and have a look at those notes just to make sure that I've remembered to put everything I had swimming around in my head in there. My characters are they fully formed? They're not really fully formed when I start. I have a very good sense of who they are, but it's almost like the more I write, the more I get to know them. So that by the time I finish the book, I know them inside out, back to front. But before I write, I have thought about what clothes they wear or what music they like or what books they read. But I also don't want to tell you exactly what they look like, because I love the idea that you as the reader bring your own images in your head when you're reading a book. So I don't want to tell you a character looks exactly like this, because they might look a bit different to you. But I will tell you maybe if they're dark or blonde, or if they're short or tall. So I'll give you some cues, but I want you also to picture them in your head. So that's what I try and do. Anyway, as I say, I have about a year to write each book, so I have a decent amount of time to put those together. And I usually start with a writing plan as well. So I'll write down, right, this is how many words I'm going to do each month. Obviously, that never happens, and then I get really quite behind, and then I end up writing in a bit of a panic towards the end. But I work well under pressure. I love a deadline. And, for years I've written features for magazines and newspapers about wine. And I'm very good at working to a deadline and a word count. And so essentially writing a book is the same thing. My books are quite short. So an average novel might be 90,000 words. Mine, again, I'm just basing it on the books I like to read. I don't like them to be too long. I like the chapters to be quite nice and short, so that I don't fall asleep before the end. And normally I only have like a chapter or two in me to read before I fall asleep anyway. So mine are around kind of 75,000 words, something like that. But again, I don't put the pressure on myself to hit a particular word count. I just write and see where the story takes me. One thing I would say about writing is the hardest thing is just to start. So if there's one thing I would tell you, if you're thinking about writing a book, maybe don't sit down and start with the book you're going to write. Maybe just take a cue from somewhere. So I remember doing this writing exercise years ago. Someone gave me the first sentence, and I think it was something like, she sat looking at the sea, and they said, right, go from there, write 300 words with that as your first line. And it almost it's terrifying, but it's like jumping into, a pool of cold water for the first time. It feels really weird at first, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you feel doing it. And I just love the process of making stuff up. I mean, there is no right or wrong when it comes to fiction. They're your words, it's your story. Obviously, what you then need to do is, when you've written it, and if you're working with a good editor, and I really do, I understand now the power of a good editor should never be underestimated, because they take your book, and to them it's like a jigsaw puzzle. So they give it back to you and tell you which bits are missing. So you do have to go back and fill in the gaps, because you might know it, but they're saying to you as a reader, come on, I needed to know a bit more here, or can you fill that gap there? And it feels, it's painful the first time you do it, because it's like being given back a piece of homework and all you can see are the red marks. You almost sort of forget that what they're saying is, look, this is really good, but we can make it better. And now I love the process of editing my books, because I essentially just see it as trying to make it the best book it can be, and it's like a challenge. So let's make it really good, and you do that together with a great editor will really help you get there. I think that's as much as I can say. I mean, like, the best advice, as I say, is just start writing. Don't overthink it. I personally love reading whilst I'm writing, so I will always be reading another book on the go whilst I'm writing my own. And again, that really just spurs me on to write better, I think. I mean, I love reading a good book when I'm writing, because it makes me think, I want to write in a way that makes me feel like that. So yes, that is me writing fiction. I hope that's helpful. Maybe if you've got other questions, just put them in the comments and we can talk about that another time. But I will come back to whoever put it, my this one here, Under a Riviera Moon. I will come back to this and talk about it in more detail at some point. But just please know it's all in 4 days. It's got 29 reviews on Amazon. I'm like a woman possessed. I love reading reviews. I love hearing what readers think. And I know there are people who say they don't read the reviews, but I don't know how they do that. I want to know what people are thinking about my book, and I want to know if it's, if it's kind of landing with people. So the reviews so far, all 5 star, bar 2 4 stars, but the response has been so positive and encouraging, and it's made me not want to just hide in the house and never write again. It's made me really excited about starting the next one. So let me know what you think, and I'll be back with a different book. I already know which book we're going to talk about next time as well. One of my favourite authors. I'll give you a clue. It's going to be made into a TV series, and that makes me so excited. And it's not Judy Cooper. We'll do that another time. See if you can guess. Anyway, bye for now.